A portion of today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. I've been thinking a lot lately about the perfect pocket controller for the Switch. The official Switch Pro controller is a great option when you want something that feels like a more traditional full-size controller, but there are so many wonderful third-party options that are slimmer, small profiles that are easy to fit in a pocket, so you can use them with the system on the go, the way I personally prefer using it. And there's actually been quite a few new ones that have entered the market, along with some refreshes of some classics. So I'm going to take a look at 4 different designs that I've enjoyed, including the 8BitDo SN30 Pro, the 8BitDo Lite, as well as the Lite 2, which we'll talk about as a pair, the new Hyperkin pixel arts that started releasing last year, and the most recent release that I've covered, the Neo S from Cracked. All of these controllers feature a lightly reminiscent retro design that, thanks to not being wired, can easily be fit in a pocket, albeit to a variety of different extents. And the first one I want to focus on is the SN30 Pro. Of the controllers that I'm talking about, the SN30 Pro is the oldest one, at least in terms of name, although it has had a couple quiet refreshes over the past couple years, with this green one that I'm holding here in particular being the 2023 design, which has a couple light updates compared to past versions, the most important of which is the fact that this controller does have Hall effect sticks. If you are not familiar with that term just yet, basically Hall effect is just a very popular option for third-party controllers right now because it is a type of stick that does not develop drift the same way that more traditional sticks do. And especially considering the history that the Switch in particular has had with stick drift, it's become a major selling point for a lot of third-party options out there. So the original version of this controller did not feature those. You can still find those options around on the internet, but if you grab one of the most recent ones, they have advertised them specifically as now including Hall effect sensor sticks. Being an 8BitDo controller, the SN30 Pro does do a good job of keeping a lot of the special features that I think are important to keep alive from official first-party Switch controllers. Namely, this does have a pretty solid feeling vibration, as well as having motion controls. It does not have the ability to scan amiibo, and in fact, I don't think any of the controllers in this video do. If that's something you care about, just make sure to keep a Joy-Con around so you're able to make use of that feature. Otherwise, the main things we're concerned about here are vibration and motion controls. Now, as the namesake SN30 implies, this is based on the SNES controller, also visually very clearly. Most of this button layout feels very much the same, with a couple important changes with the addition of things like the screen capture and home button, obviously having a pair of sticks in the center between the D-pad and all the buttons, and we do have a full set of shoulder buttons with a very thin front, right, and left bumper, and very tiny triggers on the back. When it comes to button and stick feel, 8BitDo has traditionally been one of the brands that I've really enjoyed, and the SN30 Pro is a great example of this. In particular, the D-pad feels fantastic, buttons are nice and crisp. Really, the only thing button-wise on this one, and this is a little bit of a recurring thing actually in this video, I don't love the shoulders on it. They are very simple buttons, but because of the very thin profile of the controller, it just feels a little bit awkward needing to hit the triggers and the front bumpers going back and forth, which is actually a great thing to segue from this over to the Hyperkin pixel art, a controller that looks very similar, but has some very subtle, important differences. Before we get to that though, I do want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I've talked before a couple times on the channel about my mental health. In fact, I even did a dedicated video on burnout a couple years back. And it's honestly something that I'm still always dealing with to some extent. You know, I have my good days and I have my bad days, but the bad days do end up coming back around again. And something that I have found has really helped me when dealing with some of these slumps is therapy. Having the ability to talk to someone about what I'm going through, walk through my emotions and everything that's just been going on in my mind all at once, getting it all said out loud, and getting that outside perspective that can just really make the difference, especially on some of the worst times that I'm feeling it. And one of the options that I have used for this is BetterHelp. It's very easy to get started. You can use my link that's down below in the description, which is betterhelp.com/KevinKenson. That'll take you to their site where you can answer a series of questions that is going to help them match you up with the best therapist for your situation. Usually takes only about 48 hours, sometimes can take a little longer. And one of the things that's really helpful with this is that you're able to communicate with your therapist in whatever way makes you feel most comfortable. You can do it via text chat, audio call, video call, and if for whatever reason the therapist you're matched with just isn't the right fit for you, you're always able to change again, which is very helpful. If you want to learn more and try it out for yourself, my link once again is betterhelp.com/KevinKenson. By using that referral link, that's also going to get you a discount off of your first month, or you can also go directly to their website, sign up that way, and select my channel name from the drop-down menu. Sometimes just having someone to talk to can make all the difference, and BetterHelp can help with that. So again, at first glance, the Hyperkin pixel art looks very, very similar to the 8-bit Do SN30 Pro. Obviously, they have the same general concept here of being SNES style controllers with the addition of sticks and having a full button setup. An important difference though right away with the pixel art that I want to point out is that the actual back shape of the plastic is a little more contoured and different rather than the flat design of the SN30 Pro, leading to a very minor grip that I do find to be a bit more comfortable. One of the main problems with a lot of these pocket style controllers is that while they have a small body that makes it easy to fit in a pocket, they don't feature full-size grips they're used to having on regular sized controllers, and the reason why we even have those in the first place is because it's a lot more comfortable on your hands. And so while all of these run into the issue of not being as comfortable as those options because of their small profile, the Hyperkin pixel art I think does a good job of trying to walk that middle line best they can, but just adding that little bit of contoured grip to the back of this one along with the texturing. This also results in a slightly more pronounced L2 and R2 on the back, so they're a bit bigger and the triggers feel just a little bit better, though the front L and Rs are still very tiny and slim. The D-pad I don't love the feeling of quite as much compared to 8-bit Do's, but it is honestly pretty close. It's also just a little bit larger, while the ABXY buttons feel fantastic. I love the button feel on this controller in particular, and one thing that it actually keeps alive from the SNES style design that is not present on the SN30 is the fact that you actually have slightly convex buttons for the A and B, and then slightly concave buttons for the X and Y. It's a minor detail, but honestly it is something that just evokes that feeling of the SNES controller just a little bit more to me, which is something I like. One other trade-off worth being aware of for this design is that compared to the SN30 Pro, the stick heads are a little smaller, and in fact the sticks are also just a bit shorter as well. This helps keep it lower profile so it's easier to keep in a pocket, but also means that the range of motion on the sticks and such isn't going to feel quite as well. I love the tension on these. I like having a stick that fights back a little bit and has a higher tension, so this fits perfectly for that, but you do have a reduced range of motion because of that smaller profile. As far as special features go, like the SN30 Pro, this keeps the ability to do both motion controls as well as having vibration for games. One additional feature it has that is not available when being used with the Switch, but does work if you want to use it with other platforms like, say, PC, is it actually has a turbo function. The turbo function doesn't work on Switch because it's the same button as screen cap, so it just acts as a screen cap button while used with the Switch. But if you use this on another platform, you do have a turbo functionality if you'd like to have one. Next, I want to take a look at a pair of controllers both from 8-bit Do. They are part of the same lineup but have some pretty important differences, and those are the 8-bit Do Lite and Lite 2. Now, while all these controllers are things that are capable of fitting in pockets, these are the ones that are truly designed specifically for having the smallest profile possible at the expense of being more full-featured and comfortable. Worth noting, there actually is a third version of these called the 8-bit Do SE. I don't have that one on hand. An important difference with that one is it gets rid of the shoulder buttons and instead places everything on the front of the controller, primarily meant as being a more accessibility-friendly option for those people who find more traditional controller layouts to be not as comfortable or something they can't really take advantage of. Now, while these are titled the Lite and Lite 2, the Lite 2 really isn't meant to fully replace the Lite, and in some ways, I actually kind of like the Lite better. We'll talk about why. Basically, the main difference here is that the Lite is entirely focused on being a portable-friendly controller. It does this by doing away completely with sticks in exchange for a pair of D-pads, along with having directional buttons down here where you would normally have a D-pad, as well as not having a traditional front bumper and back trigger approach, instead having the bumpers basically on the outside and then these little tiny buttons on the inside for the R2 and L2, or ZLZR in the case of Switch. This controller is also lighter on features, not having any kind of vibration while not offering motion controls either, so it is a very specific controller in terms of what games it ends up making a really good fit for, especially considering the fact that, it doesn't have sticks, it just relies on D-pads. Meanwhile, the Lite 2 is really meant to be the more fully featured version of this controller that loses out on some of that prioritization on being as slim profile as possible, but has some gains. For instance, while it's not technically as thin, that's because it actually has protrusions for the R2 and L2, so those have a traditional lineup. Obviously, we actually have sticks on this one. They're fairly small, but obviously protrude more than D-pads do, but that does give you more traditional sticks, as well as having a couple additional features, including technically it has vibration, but it's very light, and to be honest, is not the most impactful one, so it honestly doesn't fully count in my mind for that, but it does offer motion controls. Now, if you're playing games where all of this stuff is important and you want the absolute smallest profile possible while keeping all that stuff, the Lite 2 is a great choice. But as far as just a raw portable option goes, and the games you're playing don't require those features, I actually really love the light, especially when it comes to things like turn-based RPGs, visual novels, and even when it comes to things like more retro-styled games and 2D platformers, situations where you don't care about having a stick with more refined control and just a simple D-pad will do. I actually love the light. And out of all the controllers in this video, when it comes to just the raw idea of portability, this absolutely wins. There's no sticks that you have to be worried about that are protruding out. It has a very small, thin body. It is flat all the way around. If you want something that's going to almost give you a fully functional controller for specific types of games out there, while also being as portable as possible, this is it. Then, jumping to the opposite of portability is the Neo S. This is the one that I've most recently reviewed, and it very much surprised me how large this controller is. I knew it wasn't going to be as small as, say, the Lite, but just based on, pictures without any of the reference of other controllers in the shot, I was picturing something along the lines of, different shape, but similar in size to the SN30 and pixel art. Nope, it is definitely larger than both of those all around. It is wider, it is taller, it is a thicker controller. Still small enough and in the right shape to where if you want to put this in a pocket, you can, depending on the pocket, but it certainly is something that's going to be a bit more noticeable and take up some more space. Now, there are a couple immediate benefits to this approach, namely the fact that out of all the controllers on this list, this one has the most fully pronounced sticks, which impacts the portability a bit, but also means that if you want something that's on the go but still has a stick that feels like a regular full-size one, this is going to bring that. As far as just having something with a good stick height, a good size stick head, and something that's going to allow for the most refined control possible where it really matters how much you're tilting, this gives the most out of any controller on this list. I will say ergonomically, not my absolute favorite. Again, all the ones on this list aren't exactly comfortable because they're focused on being smaller in design. One of the things about this one that I think bothers me a little bit, especially compared to the SN30 and pixel art, is the fact that the sticks are close to the edges. The right stick is fine, but the left stick is so close to the edge on this that because it's not a traditional grip type, it just causes your thumb to bunch up a little bit and is not as comfortable over long periods of gameplay to me. Though worth noting, similar to the pixel art, it does have a slight curve to the back, which does give a more comfortable finger rest for, what's gripping around the body of the controller. I just wish they'd perhaps flipped the stick and D-pad on this, because normally this is a layout that feels great with handlebars, but in a smaller body like this, I think just doesn't work out as well. Now, one big advantage that this brings that the other controllers on this don't have, though, is that when it comes to app-level customization, this is the one that really offers a lot of that. 8BitDo has a couple other products that do feature app-level customization, but that's in some of their more fancy, expensive, full-size controllers, like the Pro Ultimate, whereas that's stuff you don't really get on the SN30 on the Lite. Whereas the Neo S, you're able to take advantage of Crackd's app to do a bunch of in-depth customization options, including things like remapping not only all the buttons, but even being able to do programmable macros on the back buttons, which, by the way, out of the controllers on this list, this is the only one that has back buttons. So if that's something that you care about, that's a huge win for it right there. And the fact that you can do macros for them for very simple combination inputs in a single button press is a bonus. One other thing about these is that while the general shape of the controller is a fairly straightforward design, there are a lot of different special edition designs out there that Cracked has released, including a couple really beautiful looking ones. I went for the Famicom one right here to show off, but I do have a couple other ones on hand that have really nice looking designs. I think that aesthetically, that is something that Cracked has really been excelling at. They just got to work on the ergonomics a little bit more. Out of all the controllers on this list, this is the one that is the most fully featured with the most additional special things you could take advantage of. The biggest loss really from it is the fact that it's also definitely the largest. Still just small enough, I think, to count as a pocket-friendly controller, but it's definitely stretching the definition a lot more compared to these other options. At the end of the day, I think any of these controllers is honestly a solid pickup, but there absolutely are areas where some are stronger than others. I'd say if your main interest here is really something that is as ultra portable as possible and has the tiniest profile possible, the Lite and Lite 2 are absolutely the way to go. If you don't mind something that's going to be on the larger side and is a more full-featured option, the Neo S sits at the opposite end of the spectrum there, with the SN30 and the pixel art sitting right in the middle. An important difference between those being the fact that, I think the SN30 just does a slightly better job with its buttons and sticks, and most importantly between the two is the option that has Hall effect, whereas the Hyperkin pixel art offers some very fun themed collector designs if you want something that doesn't look like just a standard stock coloration, while also offering a slightly more comfortable body thanks to its grooved back. So if you've been in the market for a smaller, portable-friendly Switch controller, I think these are really the best ones out there you can choose from right now. If you're interested in grabbing any of them, I do have links posted down below in the description. Also down there, once again, is that link for today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I want to thank them once again for sponsoring a portion of today's video. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.